Welcome to another episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit Show, episode number 100. And I'm going to do this one personally today. I'm your host, Mark Hasara, and for over 60 years, my passion has been everything aviation, as you can see here around me. On the Lessons from the Cockpit Show, we interview some of the most fascinating and intriguing pilots, aircrew members, maintainers, and aviation enthusiasts from all over the world. We want to hear their stories, but more importantly, what did they learn from these military, commercial, and even general aviation experiences and environments? The purpose of our show is to explain how does the aviation world work, but more importantly, increase critical thinking skills both in the air and on the ground. Many of the stories that you're going to hear on this show are being told for the very first time. This episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit Show is brought to you by Wall Pilot, custom aviation art for the walls of your home, office, or hangar. These are beautiful prints on vinyl, 4, 6, and 8 feet. This is a 4-footer above me of my tanker that had my name on it, 8874, when I was stationed at Kadena. That you can go to wallpilot.com and order right now. Or we'll do a custom one for you. Fill out the custom form. We can do your favorite aircraft with your name on it from a particular unit that you love, even a weapons load if you do some of these modern jets. Because this is what financially supports the show, folks. And I appreciate all of you that have gone to wallpilot.com and have bought one or two of these great prints. So go to wallpilot.com and order one or two prints, or have us do a custom one for you. On this episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit Show, I want to spend some time with you, Marcus Sarah, and my audience, because this is episode 100. Some of you may know this already, but here's an interesting fact. Those people who do podcasts and get past episode 30 do really well. Most people stop at episode 30. This is episode number 100. Took us about 2 years to get here. And I really appreciate all of you that are downloading, listening, and watching on YouTube and other places. I want to share with you a story from when I was on active duty where my boss said, I want you to do something, I'm going to pay for it. And it wasn't anything illicit, but it was really a lot of fun. And it happened on the USS Midway Museum in San Diego. In the second segment, a lot of you are asking, Mark, what's your opinion of what just happened at Reagan National as this Black Hawk helicopter, PAT-25, ran into the Bombardier CRJ, and unfortunately, a lot of people perished. I have my opinions, which I'm going to share with you. And some of the facts that are coming out from this, and some of the things that are a little scary, folks, because this didn't need to happen. This did not need to happen. This could be avoided. So, grab an adult beverage of your choice. Sit down. Strap in. And let's begin the Lessons from the Cockpit Show with your host, Marcus Sarah. My last assignment in the Air Force was at the Operational Test and Evaluation Center at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We bought a house down there, which I absolutely loved. I hated leaving that house when I retired because it was just gorgeous. It was in a beautiful place. We had great friends. Anyway, I got to the AFOTEC, as it's called, Air Force Operational Test and Evaluation Center. And my boss looked at me across the table and said, "Welcome to Afotech, Sluggo. You've got all joint weapons." And I went, "Boss, are you kidding me? I'm a tanker guy. Let's see, I've never dropped a bomb, never shot a missile, never fired a round through a gun, and you want me to take all joint weapons? Really?" He goes, "Sluggo, you're a patch wearer. You've been all through core classes. You know weapons, and you know all the joint weapons at the secret and in some cases TS levels. You got all joint weapons." And I said, "Major General Scott, yes, sir." And I thought to myself, what am I going to do here? I didn't have the experience that others in Afotech had that were fighter guys, bomber guys. But you know what, folks? When you're given an assignment like this, jump in with both feet. Never turn down an opportunity to learn. And I've said that many times on this show. And this was going to be a great learning opportunity for me because as I went back to my desk, the guy that I replaced handed me this big, huge stack of manila folders. And there was one that was about this thick. And I went, well, okay, well, I guess we start with that one first. Had a secret cover sheet on it. And as I open it up, I'm looking at this term amnesty. And I'm like, what in the world is amnesty? And I look at the executive cover sheet and I'm like, okay, affordable moving surface target engagement. What is this? B-52s, J-stars, satellite guided weapons, track and moving targets with satellite guided weapons. And I'm like, what? So the best way to find out, of course, is go down to Savannah, Georgia, where the E-8 Joint Stars was headquartered. And we had a small detachment down there of two gentlemen who were from the J-Stars community. And I said, okay, I went into my boss, Jim, I got to go down and find out what this amnesty thing is. Be down there a couple days. Would like to find out more about the J-Stars, what it does, which is going to help me with this project and figuring out what we do with amnesty. And he goes, yeah, go ahead, go. So hop on a plane, go down to Savannah, Georgia, meet with the two J-Stars experts. Now, the J-Stars is the Joint Surveillance Target Attack Radar System, an E-8 707 airframe, 7320 airframe that has this big canoe on the bottom of it that has a surface radar in it that has moving target indication, synthetic mapping. I mean, all kinds of great stuff. We'd used it in Desert Storm for the first time, obviously used it in the second Gulf War, where I learned a lot more about its capabilities, which were just incredible. Absolutely fabulous. They helped us find SAM sites, mobile SAM sites from this thing. And they did it in a way that with motion sensors, of course, with them going across the ground, but motion sensors of things that are going on on the vehicle, which I found extremely fascinating. As I read through the briefing, and they're giving me the brief on the PowerPoint slides, the very first question that comes to me is, why isn't the Navy doing this? Affordable moving surface target engagement was about sinking ships. There was a capability gap that the services had for sinking ships with satellite guided weapons. And that's what this program was all about. How are we going to affordably engage a surface target that is moving with a satellite guided weapon that only goes to a point in space, latitude, longitude, and elevation? So these two wonderful gentlemen gave me a great brief, and I said to them, Hey, does the Navy have a program like this? Blank stares. Literally. They just looked at me like, we don't know, Colonel. And I said, well, gentlemen, I think we need to go find out. Fortunately for me, my Navy contacts were able to help me. And I went to my Navy Rolodex and I said, hey, who in the Navy does this surface warfare stuff? And they go, oh, that's Swedge. Uh, excuse me, Swedge? Yeah, Swedge, the Surface Warfare Development Group, Coronado Island in San Diego. And I go, okay. How do I get a hold of him? Oh, well, here's this guy's number. What are you looking for? And I says, well, I think the Air Force and the Navy are working on the same problem in parallel universes. And I want to go down there and find out. And he goes, yeah, call him. So I get on the phone with this gentleman. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up. I still have the after action report in a spiral notebook. I kept it. And I said, hey, are you working on something that is trying to address this capability gap in the Pacific and in the Middle East for finding, fixing, tracking, targeting, engaging, and assessing moving surface ships with satellite guided weapons? He goes, oh, yeah, JSU. And I go, excuse me? He goes, JSU, Joint Surface Warfare Initiative. And I go, can I come down and talk to you? He says, yeah, sure. Come on down. What are you doing next week? I said, nothing. I said, how about I come down Tuesday night or Wednesday night and you and I meet Thursday as Friday as a backup if we need to talk more. And then I'll turn around, come home. And he goes, let's do it. I walked into my boss's office and I said, hey, boss, I got to go to San Diego for this AMSTI thing. And he goes, why there? And I said, I need to talk to the Navy because the Navy has a similar program. And I said, Jim, if they've got a similar program, then we need to do a joint technology demonstration, a JTD, and combine all of our resources to fill this capability gap. And Jim, as you well know, I'm joint warfare. And when you go joint, it comes out of a completely different bucket of money, which is, for all intents and purposes, practically bottomless. And he goes, yeah, go. And I turned, I walked out, and then I stopped at his door and I went, you know what? I got a question for my boss. And I turned around and I said, Jim, have you ever been on an aircraft carrier? He goes, why, no, Sluggo. I said, have you ever been on any Navy ship at all? He goes, no, I haven't. And I said, Jim, come with me. Come with me and let me educate you on things Navy and how they do air warfare, surface warfare. Don't know a lot about undersurface warfare, and we don't need to deal with that. But come with me and let me take you on an aircraft carrier. Let me take you on a cruiser or a destroyer, a large deck amphibious assault ship, at least those three. All right. Because they're all going to be at the pier. And he goes, Sluggo, I would love to do that. That would be the experience of a lifetime. And I said, Jim, I can set this up. I taught the Navy portion of the KC-135 weapons school syllabus. I know all the people down there, except for at Swedge. And come with me and let's enjoy this time period. Okay. And he goes, sure. I said, what's your schedule like next week? Because he says he's ready for us. Fly in Wednesday, talk to him on Thursday, Friday as a backup day if we need to have more discussions. But during the time period where we're not doing anything, let's go visit some ships and get you some ship time. And he goes, fabulous. And he literally like wiped his slate clean. And Wednesday afternoon, Albuquerque, New Mexico to Lindbergh Field in San Diego. And of course, we come in and we land over all the houses and everything. Of course, Jim's looking down and going, whoa, those are close. And I said, yeah, this is kind of a strange place to come in and land. We checked into our hotel and I took him to my very favorite Mexican food place called Casa Guadalajara in San Diego. Folks, if you're ever in San Diego, this is in the Old Mission District. Casa Guadalajara is one of my top 5 favorite places to eat. Every time we went to San Diego, I took our weapons school students to Casa Guadalajara and we ate, gorged ourselves on just some of the finest Mexican food that you can eat. Margaritas. I don't drink, so everybody hands me the keys, which is fine. But if you're ever in San Diego, a plug for Casa Guadalajara. Great, great place to eat. So I took him there to eat, talked to him a little bit about some of the Navy stuff that we're going to be doing, and wrote up some questions for this gentleman that was working at the Surface Warfare Development Group, or SWEDG, that we would be asked the next day. So the next day, about 10 o'clock, we go into his office. And I tell him, I said, hey, we have this program in the Air Force called Affordable Moving Surface Target Engagement. You mentioned to me on the phone something called JSUIT, Joint Surface Warfare Initiative, I think is what you called it, correct? Yeah. And I said, here's what we're trying to do with the B-52s, the J-STARS, AWACS, sending J-series messages to the bombs while they're in flight so that they can track the surface ship, whatever the surface ship is, and of course, put a bomb through it. Actually, at least 2 to 3 bombs through it. And just so that you know, when you're trying to sink ships, you do it from underneath. And the air bubble that is created by the JDAM 2,000-pound penetrators going through the ship to the bottom and going off breaks the keel and literally sinks the ship like within minutes. And it doesn't matter what size ship. Pretty much when you've broken the keel, the ship breaks in half and down it goes. And he confirmed that. During our discussion, I asked him, this Navy lieutenant commander, okay, just so that my boss and I understand that we're on the same sheet of music, how do you guys look at engaging the target? What types of weapons are you going to use? How are you going to do it? And he, in fact, confirmed penetrators going underneath the bomb, big bubbles, breaking the thing in half. That's how we do it. And I said, okay, good. We're on the same sheet of music. So as he's going through this, he's talking about the Navy using joint standoff weapons, of course, JDAM, but they don't want to get close to some of these ships because obviously they're armed with surface-to-air missiles, all those kinds of things. They're going to use Hornets, E-2 Hawkeyes to do this attack. And I said, okay, I think his name was Rich. Rich, let me go up on the board and draw this out. Weapons school guy, tanker guy, whiteboards are our life. We debrief on whiteboards, we brief on whiteboards. And that's why you see a lot of military people writing on whiteboards. So I drew it all out on the whiteboard. Fortunately, we were in a classified area where I could put all this up there and talk specifics. But basically, we said, if we take F-18s, B-1s, B-52s, the J-STARS, AWACS, the E-2 Hawkeye, the EA-6B jamming airplane, that's what it was at that time. Of course, all these have been replaced by Super Hornets now. And we go and basically prosecute these targets with these assets. I think this is what it would look like. He had a few changes to it, airspace wise, obviously, attack wise. And we also talked about new weapons that were coming on board, not just JDAM, but what is called the, what do they call it? LRASM, long range anti-ship missile, the AGM-158, which the Air Force has, the Navy has, for attacking ships. It was in its infancy at that time. The testing of the let's see, it was called JASM, Joint Standoff Surface to Air to Surface Missile, had not gone well. They had 3 failures, one where the missile went completely off the range, and they had to destroy it. But we included not only Harpoon, JDAM, all these other anti-ship missiles and weapons that we could use, but LRASM and JASM at the same time. Drew it all out, and we agreed this is how this could work. And so we actually drew up kind of a contract to say, these are the assets that the Air Force will use. These are the assets the Navy will use. After we got done with that contract, we thought, you know what? If we can attack ships this way, we can attack tanks, convoys, anything that's moving. Okay, that means mobile SAMs. Anything that's moving. Affordable moving surface target engagement, Joint Surface Warfare Initiative. And so we began to expand on how we did this and realized that military doctrine didn't cover it. We would have to make some major command and control changes and some engagement doctrine that the Navy had specifics on, Air Force had specifics on. And even though there was a joint warfare doctrine document, we were going to have to refine that somewhat. So I wrote up this long report about all these things when I came home, and gave it to my boss's boss. He absolutely loved it. And I think it was about 12 to 14 months later, they actually did a joint tactical, a joint technology demonstration of all this. And the B-52 dropped 3 JDAMs on a ship, blew it into 3 pieces. And I think it sank in like 7 minutes. So we were able, after I left the Air Force, the services were able to do this joint demonstration and see, oh yeah, this works really well on ships. They took it one farther, tanks, convoys, things like that, and big thumbs up. All that happened long after I left. So we had a great discussion, and we began coordinating all of our efforts. And sure enough, we put in a joint technology demonstration packet, which of course got approved. And the money for all of this, of course, grew fairly large amount, a really substantial amount. I can't remember what it was, but it was several $100 million to go out and do this, because we weren't going to do it just once. So very successful meeting, really successful. And Jim's like going, hey, this is great. So this is Thursday, and we're done. And Rich says, hey, I don't think we need to have the meeting tomorrow. Let's just coordinate everything over the phone or everything, go back, take the contract back, and your after action report, please send it to me also so that I can have a record of what you guys are thinking about. I said, yeah, sure. So Jim and I went back to our hotel room, and I said, hey, there's one place we need to go. We'd been to Casa Guadalajara that night. I said, Jim, do you want to see the ships? Oh yeah. Okay. We'll do that. Since our tickets aren't till tomorrow afternoon, let's stay here another night, and we'll do ships all morning long tomorrow. Hop on a plane and go home. Says, perfect. But there's one other place, Jim, we need to go. He goes, what's that? I go, let's go to the USS Midway Museum. He goes, do it. Let's go. So we went and got dressed, went to the Midway Museum, which, folks, if you're in the San Diego area, that is also another place you need to visit. Absolutely fabulously run museum. The people there that run that are great. There's one gentleman that I want to have on the podcast who's a double MiG killer, Jack Anchfingers, who speaks there a lot. They have an airplane F4 that's painted up in VF 161 paint scheme like he flew during Vietnam. And we're walking around looking at all the different airplanes, and we go into the hangar deck. And, Jim and I are like, oh, what is this? On the hangar deck, they had a bunch of displays. They had a place you could eat and everything. But they had simulators. And I thought, well, isn't this fascinating? And so we walked up there, and I'm looking at this, and it's 4 F4 simulators sitting side by side so that you can go in the simulator and like fight your friends. And while we were standing there, an older gentleman, young guy, mid to late 20s, and the older gentleman's wife were standing there handing over $30. And they're talking back and forth to each other. And the 2 pilots are going to hop in. I guess the wife was going to hop in the back of whatever simulator her husband got in. And they're talking smack back and forth to each other. Your mother wears combat boots. I fart in your general direction. Your mother was a hamster. Your father smelled of elderberry. All these kinds of things. And they're like, I'm going to wax you. No, I'm going to kill you. No, I'm going to kill you. And Jim turns and looks at me, big smile on his face. He says, Sluggo, I will pay the $30 for you to go sit in one of those simulators and humiliate these guys. And I went, whoa, Jim, hang on here. Let me just go fly. He goes, no, I will pay the $30 fee for you to go in there and shoot these guys down and just absolutely humiliate them. And he used the word humiliate. Okay. And Jim, if you're out there listening to this, you know exactly this conversation. Okay. Well, the simulator instructor turns to me and goes, well, do you guys want to do this? And I go, well, and Jim says, yes. And he takes out a 20 and 10, hands it to him. And I'm like, oh, come on. He goes, why? Do you think you can do any better? That's all it took to flip my switch. When the simulator operator, instructor, guy taking the cash said, why? Do you think you can do any better? That's all it took to change me. I said, let's go. And Jim's smile got even bigger. And the sim operator is like looking at me. He says, okay, you've got guns and you've got missiles, and here's how you do all this, and here's the radar, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm sitting in the simulator, and he's kind of giving me like a cockpit familiarization. He has no idea that I've flown in F-15s. I've been in the Air Force for 24 years. None of that. None of that. And as he's doing this cockpit fam with me and showing me all the switches and everything, I just turn like this and look back at my boss, Jim, and he's like going like this. I'm like, going, dude, you set me up for this. And I put the headset on, all right, while he's giving me the cockpit fan, and I hear these other 2 guys going back and forth over this intercom system about, no, I'm going to kill you, over and over again. No, I'm going to, and it's his first officer and the captain of a G4 crew. They're a G4 air crew. They had brought their boss to San Diego on business. The pilot was able to bring his wife with him on this particular trip. I guess the wives came with the air crew's boss, and they were going to be there for a couple days. And I went, oh, G4 pilots, eh? And Jim heard that over the little speaker back there, and he's just smiling and shaking his head. And he's going, Do it, dude. Throttles up. Let's go. So if the simulator instructor hadn't said, why do you think you can do better? And then gives me this like kindergarten cockpit fam. It's an F4 for crying out loud. I'd flown several F4 simulators in my time period in the Air Force, but I wasn't going to let on that I had the experience or the knowledge. And again, I'm a tanker guy, but I've been around fighter pilots at Kadena. I'd read all these Red Baron reports, particularly for F4s during Vietnam and everything. I had a lot of brain knowledge that I was about to use. So the operator says, okay, ready, ready, fights on. And just as I thought, the two G4 pilots do a level 30-degree bank turn coming at each other. Just as I thought. Don't spill the coffee. Their experience was, all right, 30 degrees of bank, we're going to turn into each other. And they'd completely forgotten about me. What did I do? Rolled the airplane over on its back, pulled the airplane up, straight up, rolled it over on its back, went over the top of them like this, looked to see what they were doing. So they made one circle like this, and they were coming back, and they lined up almost perfectly in front of me. And I came in, the kid, I'm going to call him the first officer, the kid, and the old man were like perfectly in front of me. Old man in front, kid in the middle, me in the back. I went in, gunned the kid's brains out, and then from a distance shot a missile at the old man, killed him. 37 seconds into the fight, they were both dead. Both of them. And they're like going, what just happened to us? As a matter of fact, I think the kid said that over the intercom. Okay, what just happened? Instructor says, you guys are dead. And so they went to what's called a regeneration point. And in computer games, you go to a point in space somewhere and you like come back alive, regenerate, you got all your fuel, missiles, everything. All right. And so on my little radar screen, I could see, okay, they're back over here. All right. So I turned and I go to about 35,000 feet to get above them because that's how you maintain your energy maneuverability, which they had no clue about. And sure enough, they like come out of at a warp speed right in front of me. All right. And they start, now here we go, like that. And I don't know. It took like 40 more seconds for me to kill him again. This went on for 20 minutes. The young kid rammed me. The old man actually did a really good job, did some good maneuvering, and came over the top and gunned me. And so I got killed twice. Went to the regeneration point and I did a couple laps around it real quick because I wanted to see where it was so I could recognize it. So when I killed these guys again, I knew where to go to find them and kill them over and over and over and over again. And that's exactly what I did. The young kid ran me because he couldn't shoot me. And literally I just see him come up, boom, and explosion, you see this big orange red cloud, dead. And all of a sudden I'm over the regen point. And he shows up beside me about 2 miles away, which is a perfect turn circle for an F4. This goes on and on and on for 20 minutes. The young kid is so mad that he's just trying to ram me and kill me now. The old man is putting up a really good effort. His wife in the back is like going, I don't know what's going on here. Why do you keep getting killed? And so I think at the end of the 20 minutes, the young kid I'd killed like 12 times. The old man I'd killed like 7, 8. In like 40 to 30-second to 60-second intervals. And now the simulator operator says, okay, now it's time to land. And he was kind of teaching everybody how to do it. So the old man goes first, and he pretty much almost runs into the back of the carrier. The first officer understands that his approach is terrible and goes around. And he goes, okay, 3, here you go, start. And of course, I'd read all the manuals on how you do this. 800 feet, separated to the right of the carrier, 800 feet, as fast as I could go. Brake at the bow, come back around. At the perch point, configure, slow down, hook, flaps, gear, or gear, hook, flaps. All right. Roll in. I'm about a mile off the end of the carrier. Okay. I'm a tanker guy, not a Navy guy. Okay. But that mile, you're at 300 feet, which is a normal Air Force glide slope. So I was low. All right. On a carrier, it's about 4 degrees instead of 3. But I was able to adjust power, pitch power, everything, come in, get a 3-wire my first time. And that's the first time that the old man looks over at me and says, you've done this before. And I'm just concentrate on what I'm doing. All right. So we pitch out and we land a couple more times, and then we do it at night, which is really scary. Okay. And it's $30 for 30 minutes. So the last two approaches to the deck are straight ins. And of course, I see the ball, I do all, and all that kind of stuff. I'm making all the radio calls. And the young kid is getting madder and madder and madder. The old man is getting through it, and doing his thing. And so finally, I think I said, crossbow 23, Roger ball, 1200 mains feeding. And again, the old man looks over like he's done this. And I come in, trap, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't a 3-wire okay pass, but I was able to trap back aboard the carrier at night. And those of you who are naval operators who have done this at night, you are my heroes. Absolutely. I've landed on 12,000 foot long runways, and you guys are landing on carrier decks. And there really is a mental process that the Navy guys go through when they come back in line and land on the carrier. And some of them have told me, Sluggo, landing on the carrier after a combat mission is more scarier than the combat mission, because you have to remember the carrier deck moves in 5 planes: roll, pitch, yaw, heave, and sway. Okay. Heave and sway. Okay. Because of the seas, rough seas and stuff. Well, it's all over with. I turn back to my boss. I go, I just look at him, and he's just smiling. He's going, that was great. That was great, Sluggo. You made them look like fools. They died like dogs. The young kid gets out. And of course, the passageway between the two sets of simulators runs right by mine. He gets out. He glares at me, comes around, looks at me, gives me the dirtiest look, and just walks out. I said, okay. And I hop out after he leaves and make sure that he's not coming back to beat the crap out of me when I see the old man and his wife hop out. And the old man comes up to me and he says to me, I don't know who you are, but you've done this before, haven't you? And Jim, my boss, walks up next to me and he says he's a 24-and-a-half-year U.S. Air Force pilot, still on active duty. And I said, well, I fly KC-135s, but I've got some flight time in F-15s and done a lot of war planning and all these kinds of things. He goes, that was amazing. He says, can I ask you some questions? He's curious. And I go, well, yeah, sure. What do you want to know? And he kind of goes through different maneuvers that he was doing and what I was doing. And he says, when we went like this, I mean, how did you know what to do? And I said, Captain, you gave me a huge clue while you two were talking smack back and forth to each other. And I was getting my cockpit familiarization. Oh, by the way, I've been in F4E simulators in the Air Force, so I already knew all the switches were. That guy didn't need to do that. Okay. And it's about this time that the simulator operator walks up too, and he's kind of smiling, going, wow, I've never seen something like this. And I said, you fly G4s. And I knew that you guys weren't going to spill the coffee. He goes, what do you mean by that? I said, you're used to going 30 degrees, maybe 45 degrees of bank in your airplane. That's what you're used to. That's what you're comfortable with. Dogfighting is in a three-dimensional plane. You know what I did? I said, I went into full burner, pulled the airplane up, rolled it over, it's on its back, tilted it a little bit so that on the screen I could see both of you. You did your first circle and we're coming back for your second circle of the fight. You lined up perfectly in front of me and you were below me. So I unloaded, meaning putting negative G on the jet. I was going really fast, caught up really fast, gunned your first officer, rockets on you, missiles on you, and it was done. He says, well, I mean, how did you do the gun thing and everything? I said, well, you got to look at relative motion, and of course, you've got to lead the target in front of you. And depending on how fast I'm going and so forth, that's how much lead I'm going to pull. But I also am going to look at your wing form, okay? And if you're like this, that means you're in a shallow bank, obviously like this, and you're banking up pretty good. You're turning tighter, and that's going to tell me something about how I'm going to put the pipper out in front of your airplane and before I squeeze. Well, how did you do this? How did you find us? I said, well, you shot me down. And the first thing I did was, okay, where is the regen point? The regen point was over a water tower at the docks of San Diego. They were using Flight Sim 3 or 4. And the docks at San Diego, I guess, have this big water tower. And you literally regenerated right above the docks in this water tower. So it's a very prominent um, uh, landmark that I could go to. And whenever you guys regenerated, I knew it was going to come from right there somewhere. And so I just parked myself in front of it. And then when you guys shot me down, of course, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm coming out of light speed, and my eyes are starting to open back up. And I'm looking to see where you guys are. And when the kid ran me over, um, he happened to be to my right. And he took off because he didn't know where I was. He didn't look around. And I was on his scope, but he didn't look. And I rolled after him and he lined up in front of me again. And I shot another missile at him and killed him. And I think like 20 seconds, he was back at the regen point. But I wanted to find you. He says, so you came hunting for me? I said, yeah. And, on all the displays, I could find you. It didn't tell me bearing, range, and altitude, brah. And he looks at me and goes, what? What did you just say? I said, brah, bearing, range, and altitude. It just kind of gave me your relative position. And so I'd have to kind of, okay, here you are on this little scope right here. All right. Oh, there you are. And I went after you. He says, okay, let's talk about the landing on the carrier. I mean, you're an Air Force guy in a big airplane. You haven't landed on the carrier deck. And I said, well, actually, I have. I didn't do the landing, but I was in the front seat. I've got 10 cats and traps on 8 aircraft carriers, and I've read the manual on how they do the airspace and how all the procedures for landing on the carrier. Came down the right side, 800 feet, pitched out when I was abeam the bow of the ship. Came back around at the perch point, about 45 degrees off. Gear, hook, flaps, slow to zero point 0.6 AOA, and come around the turn. I was too far out, a mile out, but I'm an Air Force guy. 300 feet, I knew how to be 300 feet in a mile. Find the ball, and of course it's calm seas and everything. The ball is not moving too much, and you have to think during the landing, where am I putting the hook point? Not where I'm going to put the wheels, where am I going to put the hook point? And that's how I did it. You see, the old man, the captain, wanted to learn. He was curious. And we spent about 20 minutes, even with his wife standing there, and she was listening to the conversation, gathering all in too. And the simulator instructor was sitting there listening to it. He didn't have any customers at the time, and he was listening to what I was telling everybody. Listening to what I was telling the captain, his wife, and of course explaining it to Jim. And he was fascinated by it all. He wanted to learn. He wanted to learn, and he was curious. So here's 3 things that I learned from this. Number 1, listen. Listen, folks. In your personal lives and in business, the good Lord gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listen. Listen to the people that are around you. Part of that listening is body language. And what's the statistics like? 80% of the things we say is in our body language, if I remember right. What's the person's body language? What are they saying? I said, when I walked up to you guys were already fighting the battle even before you got in the cockpits. And you were using terms that led me to believe these guys might be flyers. When I sat down in the cockpit and the instructor was giving me the cockpit familiarization, here's all the switches and here's the throttles, here's the flaps, here's the gear, all that kind of stuff, which I already knew. I was listening to you guys in the headset talking about your Gulfstream 4, and you gave me an incredibly vital piece of information when you said Gulfstream 4. And that vital piece of information was they're only going to use 30 to 45 degrees because they don't want to spill the coffee. They don't know how to fight a dogfight in 3 dimensions because dogfights are fought vertically as well as horizontally. And I said, that's the reason I went up over the top of you guys. I literally went into burner, pulled up, rolled over like this so that I could see the screen and see where you guys were. And sure enough, you 2 went after each other because you had no idea what my experience was. I didn't let on to who I was, how much experience I had, what I'd flown, any of that. I just sat and listened. Okay, lesson number 2. Never pass up an opportunity to learn. The whole reason that Jim and I were in San Diego was, hey, the Navy's got to have a program for sinking ships. Why are we in the Air Force looking at this in our stovepipe when I know the Navy is looking at the very same thing? And it was based on very specific intel for a very specific theater that is a threat even now. And I was dealing with this back in 2007. And the intelligence we had was amazing, folks. And all the things that I had read prior to me coming to see Rich at the Surface Warfare Development Group allowed us to create a plan to deal with surface ships. But my knowledge of carrier aviation, because I'd been on aircraft carriers, I'd watched from the LSO platform and actually watched from the front seat of an S3 from the right seat, being in the pattern landing and doing it in an F-18 simulator and an F-14 simulator. Thank you, Wimbo, once again, for taking me to the F-14D simulators 3 times for 3 hours, 9 hours in an F-14D sim, teaching me how to do this. I was able to do approaches and knew how to do it. And it was fun, except for at night. Man, it is so tough at night. But remember, book knowledge without application is just knowledge, not application. Excuse me. Not synthesis, not any of these other things. Okay. So when you have that book knowledge, go out and apply it to something. Go read Tony Robbins' books, Dean Graziosi's books, Vishen Lakhiani's books. Learn those concepts in your life to become unbeatable, but apply them. Don't just read about them. And this was the perfect opportunity for me to apply the things that I had learned and the knowledge that I had that I did not share with my two adversaries for those 30 minutes. They were only adversaries for those 30 minutes. But they were never curious and they didn't know how much knowledge I had or experience. Third thing. Okay. Number 3. Remember I talked about curious. There's a great scene in, I think the series is called Ted Lasso, where he's in some English pub and the Moneybags owner takes out his little dart set and starts throwing darts up there, and says, "Hey, why don't you get up here and let's do this 10,000 pounds? You know, let's wager 10,000 pounds." And of course, Ted Lasso takes out the dart and throws it up there, and he gets points, but not a whole lot of points. And he goes into this conversation. He goes, nobody knew who I was because you weren't curious. You weren't curious. Did you know that from the time that I was, 10 to 16 years old, every Sunday I played darts with my dad? And he had to get like 220s in a bullseye to beat this guy. And he nails it. And he says, you weren't curious. And he just lays into this guy in this darts game, in this classic episode, in this classic scene of this episode, and gets the 2 bullseyes gets the 220s in the bullseye and beats the Moneybags. All right. Because you weren't curious. And what I'm admonishing all of you is be curious about the people that you come in contact with. Those 2 gentlemen got in their cockpits. They didn't even introduce themselves to me. Did not shake my hand. Did I ask me who I was? They were in their own world. And they weren't curious about the person that hopped in that 3rd simulator thinking, I don't know him. I don't care. Be curious about the people around you. Be curious about your customers and ask the right questions. Don't be discouraged in asking the right questions. Ask the hard questions so that you can show your customers that you're curious. Ask them, what are we doing wrong? What do we need to change? I had a very fascinating reel that was sent to me this week with Tom Brady. And I put this quote in my phone, folks. Basically, he's saying, yeah, people talk to me, hey, tell me about the winds. Tell me about the winds. And I go, yeah, okay, whatever, okay. Let me tell you about the losses and the things that I learned from the losses. He says, that's where real growth is. And that comes from being curious. So there's two things in this curious category I want all of you to remember. Don't be afraid to go up and meet people around you. I think it's Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi says, uh, your next $1 million contract or business deal walks within 4 feet of you every week, because people are too afraid to be vulnerable, go up and shake somebody's hand, say, hello, my name is Mark Hasara, entrepreneur, podcast host, author, and aviation artist. And just make new contacts, folks. Because I tell you, I made a lot of contacts during my career in the Air Force, and it's funny how I was put in extreme situations in command centers, and I was working right next to somebody that I had not seen for 12 years. And ask the right questions when you meet these people. Who are you? Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your family. Tell me about your kids. Tell me about your spouse or partner. Be curious. But also be curious in your personal life by improving your life by reading out of some of the best books. Dean Graziosi's Millionaire Success Habits is something that all of us should be reading every year. Vishen Lakhiani's book on being God, what is it? I can't believe the name just escaped me, but it's on mindset and how you basically become unbeatable. Go and read those books and apply those things. Don't just read about them, write them down, write them in your phone, and apply them. So, folks, that's kind of my story of the Joint Surface Warfare Initiative and my boss, Jim, paying for something to humiliate these guys, not doing anything illicit, doing something that was a lot of fun for me, and some of the lessons I pulled away from it. Again, I'm just a tanker guy. All right. Uh, I don't have MiG kills. I don't have a lot of time in F-15s, F-14s, F-18s, but I had enough to experience and knowledge that I could get in this F-4 simulator and know exactly how to fight these guys, which was a lot of fun, except for the young kid. He didn't like it. Okay. This is the second time I've recorded this. And I wanted to talk about, obviously, the air crash on the Potomac River, but now we've got the Learjet also. Okay, so let's get right into what happened at Reagan National, and then we'll talk about the Learjet. A great resource when you're doing stuff like this is, hello, Pete. My son's dog just walked in. A great resource when you're researching this, folks, is go to airnav.com. At airnav.com, they have all of the approach plates, the arrivals, departures, everything. And it's a great resource when you are looking at these kinds of things. So when you go to Reagan National and you download the instrument approach plates that PSA 5324 was following, you can actually see it if you download it off of airnav.com. Here's a couple things the three pilots that I talked to this weekend, and then I listened to a podcast by the Black Hawk pilot, that I come away from these discussions and conversations, and the three airline pilots all confirmed and said the exact same things. Okay. I mean, almost word for word in some cases. First thing they told me, there's two airports in the United States that are difficult, or the most difficult, to fly in and out of. LaGuardia is the first one. Reagan is the second one. All three of these pilots told me the same thing. And all three of these airline pilots have flown in and out of there hundreds of times. So they told me that, Mark, just flying into Reagan is tough anyway, because of the amount of aircraft you have flying around, like helicopters, like airliners. There's also combat air patrols that have been going on over Washington off and on. So you've got high-speed jets loaded with air-to-air missiles. You've got airliners, big and small, coming from overseas as well as coming from within the United States. Then you've got a lot of helicopters, Marine One that the president flies on, as well as these other helicopters flying around too that are flying VIPs around. So you've got a really dense airspace with a lot of traffic. And if you've listened to the audio from the tower, there's like a conga line of three different airplanes that are coming down the river, getting ready to land. Now, two of these pilots told me this interesting factoid. The regional jet carriers are flying a lot. These regional guys and gals may be flying 4 to 6 legs a day. Now, I didn't talk to a regional pilot to confirm that, but that's still a lot of flying time. Even if you're going like up the East Coast, from like Miami to Savannah, Savannah to Raleigh, or whatever. The probability that this crew had been flying a lot, maybe even that day, the day before, is very high, very high. And now this crew is coming into Reagan at 9:00 at night, with the possibility of they may have gotten up very early in the morning, 4:00, 5:00, to fly several legs for this particular airline. And this is not uncommon. All three of the airline guys that I talked to, and two of them I've had on this show, Dave Mason and Taz, both have told me that the regional guys and gals fly a bunch, and that the probability that they were tired from having a very long day in the cockpit is very real. So think about that, folks. You have a crew that may be flying their fifth, maybe sixth leg, coming in at 9:00 at night when they may have gotten up pretty early in the morning. And those of you that are pilots, particularly military pilots, there's many times where we've flown tired. There's many times during Desert Storm and during Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, where I was tired, I almost to exhaustion, because we had some long days. During Iraqi Freedom and the run up to Iraqi Freedom, I worked 3 36-hour days over a period of about, I think, 2 weeks. Now, I'm not flying, but still, you're tired when you're working that hard. Now, all three of these airline pilots told me the same thing about the approach that PSA was doing into Reagan. They're flying the main approach to runway 01, circling to land to runway 33. The winds were gusting at 25 knots. That's a pretty significant wind. KC-135 has a 25 knot crosswind limit on the aircraft. So 25 knots, when you hear 25 knots, gusting to 25, and if you go back and you listen to the tower recording, it says that. That's a stiff wind, folks. That's tough to deal with. And they're coming down the river on this approach, and there was 1, 2, 3 airplanes when I looked at Flight Radar 24, plus airplanes that they're trying to get out of Reagan also. Now, I looked at the arrival and the approach plate to 01. There is a lot of obstacles off of both sides of the river, obviously. One thing I found out very fascinating. On runway 01, you have to, if you go missed approach, you have to make almost immediate left turn and continue kind of down the river a ways, climbing to 2,200 feet. The reason why? 1.5 miles off the end of the runway is a restricted area. I don't know if it's Bowling Air Force Base or something else, but there's a military facility 1.5 miles off the end of the runway that the altitude limit is surface to 18,000 feet. That's big over the middle of a city. So I've not looked to see what's under that, but something important is under that, and you can't violate that. And it says on the approach plate, don't go in here. And that's why it has this great big left hook as you're coming off the runway if you go missed approach. So looking at the ILS to runway 01, circling to land to runway 33, the visual descent point is 2.4 DME and about 2.1 miles off the end of the runway. And that's probably where PSA began its circling approach, being told to do so. Now, I want to say something to you about this. And this is something my buddy Dave brought up. And Taz brought this up too. The tower tells them to circle. They don't have to take that. If you're tired, it's 9 o'clock at night, you've been flying all day, you can tell tower, we do not accept that. We're going to land on 01. There might be a phone call after you do that between tower and the crew. But there's been numerous times where I've told air traffic control and a tower, we ain't doing that. We're going to continue on this, or we're going to stay at this altitude, or we need to climb up now. And in fact, there's been numerous times where it was really bumpy at our altitude, and I told air traffic control, we're moving. I'm not asking permission. I'm moving because we're getting bounced around really good. So all of you pilots out there, remember that, ATC can tell you to do something, but if it violates the performance of your airplane, if you think it's a safety risk or it's a risk to your crew because you've been up all day, flying all day, it's 9 o'clock at night and you're freaking tired from getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, tell them, hey, tower, we'd like to continue runway 01 and land on 01. Because all tower has to do is just say, okay, some folks are going to take off a little later. That's fine. And more than likely, if this crew had stayed on the approach on runway 01, the longest runway at Reagan, this wouldn't have happened. I'll submit to you too, this shouldn't have happened. This wreck shouldn't have happened. And I'll say that toward the end. Right. So you get to the 2.4 mile DME, and that's where you begin circling. That's your visual descent point, as we call it. And that's normally when you begin your circling approach. And that hard altitude was, I think, 600 feet. Again, I'm going to have to go back and look, but it was about 600 feet. And at the visual descent point, excuse me, it was a 600-foot hard altitude, a half mile behind it. So at 2.9, they had a 600-foot altitude restriction, probably for terrain, probably for buildings, obviously. So at that visual descent point, that's where you can begin going down. I'm not quite sure where or what altitude PSA was at, but I'd be willing to bet probably between 400 and 600 feet. The circling men's were 900 and a mile and 3/4, but it was a clear visibility unlimited day. So at that visual descent point, that's where we began to turn. Now, when PSA 5024 made that turn and was heading down the river toward lining up on runway 33, the helicopter and that CRJ were literally nose to nose. Nose to nose. Within 100, maybe 150 feet of each other in altitude. They were heading right at each other. The captain of PSA was probably doing the approach, according to my three buddies. The first officer was probably heads down on the FMS, creating kind of a center line that would appear on their displays in order to fly the approach. There's high intensity runway lighting at both of these runways, 01 and 33. So they're all lit up really good. But right as PSA was getting lined up, it made a left-hand turn. And in that left-hand turn, they put their belly up to the helicopter and probably didn't see it. Even though they were going straight at each other, had all their lights on, landing lights, everything's on because they're well within the final approach fix. They're all lit up. Landing lights on, the tail lights that are shining on the American Airlines, everything's on. I mean, it's a bright target. And they're heading right at each other. And when PSA made the left-hand turn to continue their circling approach and line up, the first officer on the right side of the plane may have had his head down in the cockpit, and the airplane was belly up to the helo, and the captain probably didn't see it. So during that time period that they're making this circle to land, this aircrew is totally focused on getting the airplane on the ground. And probably not looking outside. The captain is looking at the runway, getting himself lined up, not only laterally, but vertically, based on the visual approach lights, okay? The VASIs, visual approach slope indicator lights, and the high intensity runway lights. And he's totally focused on, okay, lining up, proper altitude, airspeed, am I configured? All these things are running through his head, like a HEFO check, okay? Hydraulics, electrics, fuel, everything, making sure that they are ready to touch down. Gears down, everything. Flaps are down, everything. With the co-pilot, making sure that he's got visual references on his displays to make sure that he's lined up or has another reference in the cockpit in front of him to help the pilot captain line up on the runway. In a left bank turn with the pilot obviously sitting lower, probably doesn't see the helo. First officer, same thing. And that's where things come apart. All right. In my opinion. And if you look at Flight Radar 24, it may still be on there. I don't know. But as they make this turn and are lining up is when they get hit. And they're still in a turn. And a matter of fact, somebody actually downloaded the Flight Radar 24 playback, and you can tell exactly the point where they got hit. You zoom in on it, and the reason you know that is because the altitude drops from 320 feet to like 0 in a matter of nanoseconds. That was the point where they got hit as they're lining up, just beginning to roll out and get ready to land. Here's something else I found out by looking at the approach plate that I found very interesting. Reagan Tower frequency VHF is 119.1. The UHF frequency that more than likely the helo is on was 257.6. If you're a pilot, you have been taught clearing on the radios. It's not just the Mark 1 eyeballs, but it's also what are you hearing? Clearing on the radios. And you heard the helo acknowledge that they were to go behind the CRJ. And they said, yep, okay, we'll go behind it. But they're on two different frequencies. I'm almost sure that the CRJ was on 119.1 and the helo was on 257.6. If they'd been on the same frequency, listened to all the same things, that would have been way more better. Because again, there's this conga line of airplanes coming down the river, getting ready to land. And so the question I ask is, why weren't they on the same frequency? The helos should have VHF in them. Normally, the Army has VHF. And by the way I'm listening to the radios, it sounds like they were on the two different frequencies. So, and that may just be procedure for coming down there. Now, one other thing that not only this Black Hawk pilot talked about in this podcast, but all three of my airline buddies told me the same thing. There have been numerous times where they have been taken off, or more importantly, while they were landing, that there was helos underneath them or beside them. And in many cases, not called out. And that's why clearing on the radios is so important. Where is that helo? What is its altitude? What's its heading? Because on the radar screens, and this has been proven, and somebody actually took a video of this, there's a collision alert for both the helo and the CRJ. It says CA above both of the airplanes. CA. That means collision alert. In other words, you got about 30 seconds to fix this before they hit each other. And why nobody saw that, I don't know. I don't know if there's an oral tone when you have that in air traffic control or in the tower, but the electronic systems knew something was about to happen. And there's been a lot of people saying, well, the helo didn't have on its transponder. Oh yeah, it did. Because Flight Radar 24 couldn't follow it if it didn't. It had its transponder on because that collision avoidance and that collision alert showed up and gives about, I think it's 30 seconds warning. and nobody did anything about it. Here's another thing. The CRJ has Terminal Collision Avoidance System, TCAS, which is a fabulous tool. In the KC-135, we actually did our rendezvous based on TCAS because at extended range, it would go out to 40 miles. And if our receivers, particularly in fighters in a combat situation, we're in our rectangle 70 by 30 miles, and they could come in from some direction. And we always told them in the special instructions, have somebody, when you're coming to refuel, squawk mode 3 so that when you're within 40 miles of us, we can see you on the box. And it shows up on the multifunction display in front of us too. We can see you because it helps us affect the rendezvous. We may have airplanes on us, but if we are at the south end of the rectangle and a Strike Eagle 4-ship is coming in from the northeast and the north end of the rectangle, I'll turn to go get them. And when I'm about 19 miles from them, I will make another turn in front of them so that they line up right behind me. Of course, I'm telling them, hey, we got chicks in tow. In other words, we got airplanes on us. Or, hey, the boom is clear. Again, clearing on the radio. Come right up to the boom. We're ready for you. Or we got chicks in tow. They'll know that, all right? Because again, that mode 3 squawk shows up not only on the displays in front of us, but also on the big one here above the fuel panel. And we used it to make rendezvous. And in order for that collision avoidance alert to go off on the radars in air traffic control or in the tower, they had to have their mode 3 on. Had to have it on. Now, just kind of a quick recap for the CRJ crew. That crew may have been tired. They've probably flown a number of legs that day, maybe have gotten up early. The NTSB will have all this in their report. They're flying into one of the 2 busiest airfields in the United States at 9 o'clock at night with helicopters, all kinds of aircraft running around. They're focused on the approach because, again, they're circling to land and they've got the belly up to the helicopter. FO's got maybe his head down, making sure that they've got an extended center line to line up on. And they're on 2 different tower frequencies. Okay. There was one other thing I just thought of, and it just escaped me. I'll come to it and think about it when I'm talking about the helo. So let's say a few words about the helo. The helo's on a training mission. You have the gal that has about 500 hours, 450, 500 hours with an experienced 1,000-hour pilot and a crew chief. They're doing a pilot pro, some kind of pilot proficiency, maybe even a checkout. All right. Now, there's a lot of things coming out about the gal that was on the helo that, she'd been working for the Biden administration, doesn't have a lot of flying time, all those kinds of things. Right. In my opinion, her White House aide and all that kind of stuff is irrelevant to what's going on here. Irrelevant from the standpoint of, yeah, okay, she had a ground job and a pretty major one. I've had several of those too, but I still had to keep my proficiency up. And it sounds like that was what was going on here. There is a corridor for the helicopters to fly down that's capped at 200 feet. And last night, listening to this Black Hawk pilot talking about how they make the altimeter changes was very eye-opening, okay? Because obviously, you go down and you change it in the altimeter, all right, but you have to change it in the box or on the panel, the multifunction display in front of you. And he said something very interesting. He said, first of all, it's a little cumbersome to do that. Second of all, it's small. And third, if they were off by one digit, if they had set instead of 2981 and put in 29981 and put in 2991, that would make them off by 100 feet. They're off by 125 when they hit. So now I think one of the things that they're looking at is what altimeter setting was set in the helo, because they were off by about 100 feet. And this guy was saying, hey, putting this stuff in the box is cumbersome. Now, all of you Black Hawk folks, helo folks out there, if I'm wrong about that, please, please, please put something in the comments and correct me. Because I'm only going on this one Black Hawk guy, helicopter guy talking about this. All right. In the Black Hawk, there's 4 screens across, 2 in front of the pilot, 2 in front of the co-pilot. And of course, the engine instruments in between. It's, believe it or not, the cockpit's made by Rockwell, or now Collins Aerospace. And it's a thing of beauty, believe me. There's all kinds of information that's put on this thing, but sometimes changing this stuff, it puts your head down in the cockpit instead of being out. And when you're flying around one of the busiest airports in the nation, you want to have your head up on a swivel looking around. You don't want to be down in the cockpit, changing numbers. A lot of people have asked me, they're on night vision goggles. I hope they weren't. And here's why. You're flying down the river, the Potomac, with a lot of aircraft that are coming head on to you with all their lights on. And the NVGs are just going to get completely washed out, completely wiped out. They may have had the NVGs on, but flipped up. I got that. I can understand that. But having them down, flying down the river, going by Reagan National with high intensity runway lighting on, because it's 9 o'clock at night, on both runways, runway 01 and 33, which they were going by. Plus, I'm in the middle of downtown DC with all of the other lights of the buildings. In the NVG world, they have a term for this. I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, even though I was an NVG instructor many, many moons ago. Having the NVGs down would not be to their advantage. And a lot of people think, oh, well, they've got night vision goggles on, they can see everything. No, you can't. There are issues with the night vision goggles when you're in that kind of high intensity light environment where the goggles don't do you any good at all. And a matter of fact, the old Mark I eyeball is much better in that scenario and in that environment than having them down and looking around. Because remember what I told you, and I've seen the ground tracks. The CRJ was coming straight at the helicopter. And so all of its landing lights, everything are pointing right at the helicopter. And that would have washed them out completely. And probably blinded the helo pilots too, because of the intensity of it going through the goggles and being magnified the way it is. So, in my opinion, and again, my opinion only as a tanker guy, night vision goggles would not have helped them in this situation. And I doubt that they had those things down in front of them and were using them because of the intensity of the lights that were around them. Now, what were they concentrating on? What was this pilot team concentrating on? You have an instructor pilot with 1,000 hours and another pilot with 450 to 500. In my mind, if I am flying an aircraft just a mile and a half or less off the end of the runways of one of the major airports in the United States that's in the top 5 busiest, my head's on a swivel. I am looking outside, everything. And in the audio, it says, the tower says, hey, do you see the CRJ? Yes, we see the CRJ. Pass behind the CRJ. This is Monday morning quarterbacking on my part. But why did the tower or that aircrew just say, hey, Reagan Tower, we're going to do a couple 360s and hold here and wait till you get everybody out of here. You've got a conga line of 3 airplanes coming in. You've got 2 airplanes trying to take off. How about we hold right here? And when things calm down a little bit, we'll scoot across. If I'm coming up to that situation, folks, situational awareness would tell me, have your altimeters, the corridor set up on the MFDs down in front of me so I can see exactly where it is. Everything would have been set up so that I knew exactly where I was and where I was supposed to be. Exactly. And I would have done that before I got into Reagan's airspace, Class A, Class B airspace. And that's one of the things about having not only crew resource management, where all the pilots are backing each other up, but that's also having situational awareness to say, you know what? There's a lot of airplanes coming down the river right now. Maybe it's a better idea for us just to hold here for a few minutes and let everybody get on the ground. And just stay out of everybody's hair, both Potomac Approach and Reagan Tower, until things calm down a little bit. And again, folks, that's Monday morning quarterbacking. And I'm the first one to admit, I was not in the cockpit of the Hilo or the CRJ, but I have a lot of flying time in a lot of different airplanes, to include helicopters. And flying at 9 o'clock at night with that busy of an airport with, again, airplanes trying to take off. And remember, when you listen to the audio from the tower, it goes, immediate, take off immediate. And so there's a sense of urgency in that tower controller's voice. Let's get things moving here. Let's get things moving here. And if I'm listening to tower on the same frequency, I'm going to sense that urgency. And there's been numerous times where, even during pilot training, we were flying day out and backs in our T-38 down to Amarillo, which is a really tough place to get in and out of because of the way the approaches are set up. That's why we picked this place to go, because it's a great training environment. And I was number 5 in line to land. And I remember saying to the tower, thinking, God, he's got 5 airplanes in front of him. I can hear the urgency in his voice. A little overworked. And I remember telling Amarillo Tower, Speedo 55, would it help you if I make a 360 or slow to final approach speed? And he said, Speedo 55, slow to your approach speed, 180 knots or less. And so, quite a ways from the airport, gear flaps down and slowed below 180. Matter of fact, my approach speed, I think, was like 165 or something like that. But that allowed everybody to get out in front of me. And when I got on the ground, of course, the instructor that was up in the tower said, Sluggo, awesome. You had total SA on what was going on today. And you heard that this tower controller was a little overworked And by you slowing to your final approach speed, allowed him to space everybody and get everybody on the ground safely. Okay. And the tower controller said to give you, kudos for helping them out. And you pilots out there, it's okay to do that, but you've got to be listening on the radios and be able to develop in your mind, what does the situation look like? What are the altitudes? What are the headings that everybody's on? What's everybody doing? And build that air picture in your mind. And when you have airliners on 119.1 and a helo on 257.6, that may be difficult. That may be difficult. Okay. And that brings me to my next point. When Pat 25 says traffic in sight, which traffic did he have? Or she have? What was she looking at? What was he looking at? Was he looking down the river? This airplane would have been right here, all lit up. They said they have traffic in sight, but still, I would have challenged the helo this way. Do you have the CRJ at your 10 o'clock position in sight? 10 o'clock position, same altitude, in sight. Again, this is Monday morning quarterbacking on my part. I was not in the tower, nor was in either airplanes. But based on what I've seen in the recordings and the tower frequency conversations, I would have specifically asked Pat 25, do you see the CRJ at your 10 o'clock co-altitude or 10 o'clock near your altitude in sight? And both heads should have gone and looked at 10 o'clock. That's situational awareness, folks. Now, it didn't stop them from running into each other. And it looks like the helo hit right at the wing root of the CRJ, which means the helo blades went through the cabin first, and then the fuselages came together. There's a new close-up video that shows it looks like the CRJ wing coming off the thing flipping into the water, because they're only at 300 feet. So, it went in the water in just a matter of nanoseconds. And then it shows the helo swinging like this. It continues to go swinging like this, and it goes into the water. And now we've had the worst airline crash since 2009, I think, with 67 souls killed, 64 on the CRJ and 3 in the helo. So those are kind of my points on that. Questions to ask are, what was the altimeter setting inside the helicopter? Were they on night vision goggles? Did the CRJ crew, in fact, see the helicopter? Were they, in fact, belly up with the first officer head down, working to get a center line and set up the approach to circle? And was each aircraft where they were supposed to be? The helo in its corridor at 200 feet, below 200 feet, and the CRJ clear to land, circling to runway 33. That's kind of my take on this. Please, in the comments, if you have some information, please leave it in the comments, folks, because I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. The National Transportation Safety Board were right on the scene. Their headquarters is in Washington, D.C. And I'm sure within minutes of this being reported, because you can hear the crash fire rescue guys getting alerted, and they're going out. And I'd be willing to bet that they're somehow connected to the FAA office and the National Transportation Safety Board. And that GO team was there probably within an hour, looking at everything. I've had to get transport for a NTSB GO team to go to Guam. There were 17 individuals that are the initial folks that look at everything, mechanics for engines, flight controls, air traffic controllers, physicians. I mean, everything on this one team. 17 total that had to go from Washington, D.C. to Guam when Korean Air Flight 801 crashed. So that NTSB GO team was probably on scene fairly quickly. The folks in the tower probably marked the tapes because everything's recorded in the tower so that they had that information. There's video from all over the city of the crash, and now this one video, which looks to be less than a half mile away from the impact, because it had some pretty high definition. Again, you could see the helicopter hit near the wing root, the fuselage. You can see the helicopter spinning off like this as it goes down. They're going to look at the physiology of the pilots. They're going to look at the history of the pilots. They're going to look at crew duty day of the pilots. They're going to look at altimeter settings. They're going to try and recover as much off the bottom of the Potomac as they can, which they can do. It's easy. I mean, it's not like we're going to the bottom of the ocean for this and get all the parts and pieces and piece this all together. But here's my one hope of all of this. As tragic as this is, I hope, folks, that this is a wake-up call. I hope this is a wake-up call for the National Transportation Safety Board, the FAA, and Congress to say it is now time to upgrade the system. We are still working with 1950s technology, and we have all of these smart people that can create incredible technology to aviate, navigate, and communicate. Everything falls in one of those three categories. And I hope, folks, that this is our country's wake-up call to say, we have got to fix this system and make it right. We haven't had a major accident since 2009. Let's not have another one, because we can't get everybody talking on the same frequency. We can't have ADS-B, TCAS, and transponders talking to each other. All those kinds of things. Oh, that was the other thing that I forgot. TCAS. All of my airline buddies confirmed what I already knew from being in the KC-135, that below 1,000 feet, that TCAS system does not give you an oral warning, like climb now, descend now, turn right, turn left. It goes off below 1,000 feet. So that collision system that's built into the airplane, particularly into the CRJ, I don't know if the helicopter had TCAS or not, but that system shuts off below 1,000 feet to 800 feet, because you can't descend when you're on a final. Where are you going to go? You can climb up, turn left, turn right, maybe. So that system has to be able to tell you, hey, traffic alert out here. Don't tell me what to do. Just tell me you've got a traffic out here, and call it out. Traffic, 10 o'clock, 200 feet. Or just traffic, all the way down to touchdown. Don't tell me to climb or descend or turn right or turn left. Just say traffic, so that our heads go, and we start looking around. Below 1,000 feet, folks, that great piece of technology goes into like this dormant mode and won't tell you that something's out there. The way it is situated and built right now doesn't tell you that's traffic out there. You may see the flashing red, maybe. I don't know. I'd have to go back into my KC-135 pilot manual and find out. I still have those, if you can believe it, and see if it flashes. But it was flashing in Potomac approach and departure, and it was flashing in the tower, according to something I've seen, and saying CA above the CRJ and above PAT 25. And that CA red flashing means collision alert, collision alert, collision. So the system on the ground knew it was going to happen, but I don't think the system in the air knew it was going to happen in the CRJ cockpit or in the helicopter. That's the point I forgot. Back to my main point here. Doge has gone through and found hundreds of billions of dollars. Let's start spending it in the right places. And folks, I will tell you, our system of travel in the air is one of the safest in the world. When you look at how many hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of miles we fly in the United States on a daily basis with no problems like this until now, it's a safe system. I have no reservations about getting on an airliner and going somewhere right now. None at all. The only thing that concerns me right now is who are the illegal aliens inside our borders, and are they carrying surface-to-air weapons? That I think about a lot. But even that's being handled now too. I have no reservations about flying on any airline inside the United States or internationally for that matter, folks. I really don't. But it's time for us to take a hard look at what does our airline system need to bring it to the 21st century and make it foolproof, bulletproof, and impact proof. And we've got enough smart people around the United States that can create the systems that will help us do that. No doubt in my mind. Okay? All right, last thing, folks. The Learjet crash in Philadelphia. This was a Mexican registered aircraft, Learjet 55, and within less than a minute hit the ground at a very high rate of speed and killed all 5 people inside the airplane. Huge fireball, and the wreckage is just strewn out all over everywhere. All of you have seen the video of the airplane impacting near this Dunkin' Donuts. So let's talk about that crash for just a moment. My good buddy Taz is a Learjet guy, and he told me something about the airplane that I didn't know. He called it the hellhole. There is some compartment in the back of the airplane that you can only get to, if I'm not mistaken, from the outside, that has circuit breakers, a lot of circuitry, and some of the flight controls for rudder and elevator in the back. So 2 of the motion of axis of the airplane goes through this compartment. He told me that if there is a fire in that compartment, you're toast. You can't get to it, and the airplane's going to crash. It is being reported by people who saw the airplane. They're saying, and I caveat this with, it's very early in this investigation, and we don't know everything, but people that are eyewitnesses have said they saw it on fire before it hit the ground, or there was a fire in the airplane before it hit the ground. This electronic stuff and flight control stuff that goes through that hellhole, you can't get to. And if it breaks, particularly on takeoff, when you're heavyweight, full of gas, passengers in the airplane, very maneuverable airplane, great engines. It's a wonderful airplane, that the Learjet, okay? But Taz told me, if you have a problem in this compartment in the air, you can't get to it, all right? And he says that may be one of the causes. Now, it's coming out in the news, and if you listen to the air traffic control folks in the tower and everything, there's a very faint voice that people are saying, you know, you've been effing with us and now we're effing with you, or something like that. Like some ISIS terrorist saying, we mess with the airplane. I'm sure there's going to be more come out about that. Because, folks, I'll tell you something. An airplane that's hit by a surface-to-air missile, it's very, very noticeable because of the fragmentation warheads that are in a heat-seeking surface-to-air missile. There's just puncture wounds all over the back of the airplane, near the engines or whatever, because that's the heat source, obviously. But as I looked at the video, it appears that the airplane is coming down through an undercast or overcast, because you hear it. It's somebody's doorbell camera, and they're getting ready to walk out. You hear it, and then all of a sudden you see the bright airplane, and it's moving at a high rate of speed. And then it hits, and there's a huge explosion again because it's full of gas. It just took off. So that's one of the other things that we have to look at. And I've told you in my last discussion, there's one thing that concerns me right now. And if you listen to Sarah Adams on the Sean Ryan podcast, she said they think, and she's just Sarah Adams, call sign Superbad, is a CIA targeteer. And she says they believe there's about 1,000 hardcore Al-Qaeda folks here in the United States, and that they have Iranian-made SA-16 shoulder-fired, what we call man-portable air defense systems, or SAMs, that folks are very hard to track. I'll tell you a true story. The Air Mobility Warfare Center at Fort Dix, New Jersey, would go around to all the tanker units and airlift units, and they would talk to them about threats around the world. One of the individuals on that team had a suitcase that he brought with him. In that suitcase was a disassembled SA-7 shoulder-fired man-portable air defense system in the suitcase. Now, didn't have its rocket motor, battery was dead, no warhead, any of that. He walked through LAX, Las Vegas, Reagan National, Atlanta, Chicago, Seattle, with that suitcase. This was prior to 9/11, of course. And it was, nobody stopped him until he got to Des Moines, Iowa. And a guy said, do you mind opening that thing for me so I can see what's in it? And he goes, yeah, sure. He opens it up. And of course, the eyes on the law enforcement dude, when he saw, oh, this is just a disassembled SAM in a suitcase, just went, wow. By telling that story, I want you to understand, folks, it's very easy to move these things. They come in something that looks very much like a carry-on, a little bit bigger, but it can be assembled anywhere. We do not have the military or law enforcement manpower to spread out around LAX, Seattle, Chicago, Atlanta, Denver, Salt Lake, New York, LaGuardia, anywhere, to find somebody that's on a rooftop with one of these things. As part of our syllabus in the KC-135 Weapons School, we go down to Fort Bliss. They have a simulator down there for Stinger, and all the students get to play with it and actually have a tanker take off in front of them, and they see how easy it is to track a tanker. CFM56 engines run fairly hot. And then what we do is one student crew flies while another student crew is on the ground, and they set up based on their analysis around the airfield at Fort Bliss. And the tanker crew does defensive maneuvers going in and out, what we call TAD. What was it stand for? Terminal approach defense, where you're flying low or doing certain things, okay, trying to lower your signature, and you have the other students with no fooling Russian equipment. The Army's Missile and Space Intelligence Center is down there, so they literally have every one of these types of man pads available. SA-7, SA-18, what is the next one? SA-22. All of them are there, and our students got to play with them. And there's no airliner that has defensive systems on it. They're not even looking at that. And that's why this threat concerns me, is because you can literally set up anywhere in a city, shoot one of these things at somebody, blow a wing off, and be gone by packing in a suitcase and leaving. And somebody will see you come out of a building with something that looks like a carry-on bag, and citizens of the United States won't even know the difference. I'm not saying this Learjet got hit by one of these things, but there's some real interesting information now about a voice in the tower frequency saying something about you effing with us, we're going to go out and come after you. I've only heard it on 2 different channels. It's very hard to hear. But both of the people that were listening to it go, when you hear it. And it sounds like, an accented voice saying something. So something will come out, hopefully, in the NTSB report. I don't know. But if they find the wreckage of the airplane, and they see these little peppered holes in it, of these little fragmentations and everything, it'll be intuitively obvious, even the most casual observer, that a warhead went off near this airplane. There was an airliner shot down. I can't remember. I think it was in Iran, a 737 that got hit by a missile. And sure enough, the warhead, blast fragmentation warhead, went off just behind the cockpit as it went by the airplane. And the sensors in the missile go, okay, here's the target, and detonated it. And there's fragments all up and down the side. It was real easy to say, yeah, this thing got hit by a missile. I hope not, folks. But again, I want to let you know, I am concerned about who is in our borders and what they are armed with. And now that we have said we're coming after the cartels, that even puts more in my imagination, because they have more than enough money to go pick some of these up on an open weapons market. So yes, it concerns me. Is it going to keep me from flying? No, it's not. If it's my time to go, it's my time to go. And I'm telling you, all of you, it's still very safe to fly. But I know that right now, Homeland Security is looking at all this very closely to see if they can find these folks. And hopefully all the agencies are working together, law enforcement, military intelligence, DNI, everybody saying, who's here? What are their intentions? What are they carrying with them? I think that's all, folks. Oh, the crash at Eielson. I have one question. Why is the airplane falling past the pilot and his parachute? Normally, when a pilot ejects, the airplane is underneath him going down, him or her. But all of you have seen the video from Eielson Air Force Base, and truly, the F-35 is going by the pilot in their parachute. That's a question I have about that crash. Did that airplane continue going up? It's in the pattern. There's another airplane in the pattern, and you see it just for a few seconds as it goes by, as that airplane is tumbling down to the earth. But I'm telling you, folks, the first thing I thought when I saw that video was, why is the airplane up here and the pilot down here in his parachute? That doesn't make sense. At what point in flight did that pilot eject that caused the airplane to be above them, not below them? And of course, there's not a big post-crash explosion. The airplane's probably not got a lot of gas in it. Now, when you fly in Alaska, you have to keep extra gas on board. We did as tankers because if the airfield went down for some reason in Fairbanks, you had to fly to Anchorage to land, which is 2 hours away. So you had to have at least an hour and 30 minutes extra flying gas in the airplane in order to be able to make it to an alternate. Of course, Eielson Air Force Base is its own base. You have Fairbanks International Airport that's also there. Anchorage, like I said, is 2 hours south. And you had to have extra gas. I don't know what it is for a fighter. I just know what it is for a tanker. So there you have it. But there's some unusual things as soon as I watched the video of the F-35 going down, that the airplane was falling and tumbling by the pilot in his parachute, going past that individual in his parachute. That's the first thing I noticed. So again, another investigation that is ongoing that we'll find out about here pretty soon, hopefully. Usually at the 30-day point, they publish, here's the interim report. They'll do that for the Eielson F-35 crash. The NTSB will more than likely have an interim report for the crash at Reagan, and then this Learjet crash. You know, there'll be maybe at the 30-day point an interim report that says, hey, here's what we've found so far, until the final report is published maybe a couple months later. All right, folks, that's all I can think of for today. Thanks for listening. I hope you got something out of this. And again, I've told you where it was my opinion. I want you to comment on this stuff. Please, please comment on this stuff. If I said something wrong, I want you to correct me. And believe me, my ego isn't that big, all right? I'm not going to take it personally because I want to learn from you. Because all of you have knowledge out there. I'm not a Black Hawk pilot. And so you Black Hawk guys and gals, if you've got something to say about this, please do. If you fly CRJ 700s and fly for American and have flown into Reagan down the river like this at night, please comment. I would really enjoy hearing that. F-35 pilots, why is the airplane coming down past the pilot? Let me know. Learjet folks, you know, what about this hellhole thing? And, you know, what are the characteristics of the Lear 55 that may have caused this crash. So there you have it. Please comment. Looking forward to that. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and hear my story about being in this simulator, the USS Midway. But I learned a lot from that event, folks. I really did. That carries over into business and into our personal lives too. As far as the disaster at the end of the runway at Reagan National, folks, the NTSB is on site. They're picking up the wreckage. They have the black boxes. They're recovering the bodies. More will come out of this after the NTSB investigation. They're going to be looking at this really hard, I think, because this is like the first major accident of the new administration. Not that they don't look hard at other ones, but I think because this could have been avoided, this is going to get a really close look because they're going to use the findings to kind of be a roadmap for some of the changes that need to be made. And there's a lot of changes, folks, that need to be made. Do not get me wrong. Flying in the United States is extremely safe. This is the first accident with fatalities in the United States in a very long time. It is safe to fly. I'm going to be flying soon. I have no reservations about getting on an airplane because I've got people like Taz, Al Hunt, all these other people that fly these airplanes that are extremely professional. But accidents happen, and this one could have been avoided. This episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit show is brought to you by Wall Pilot, custom aviation art for the walls of your home office or hangar. 4, 6, and 8 foot prints of your favorite airplanes on vinyl, very detailed, like the one you see above me, a 4-foot KC-135 8874, my airplane when I was stationed in Okinawa. There's 158 ready to print right now that you can order and get within less than a week. If you want a custom print done, fill out the custom form of your favorite airplane. We put your name on it from whatever unit you want. We can even do various weapons loads on particularly the modern jets. And we'll send it to you. Go to wallpilot.com and I'll put a link to some of the ones that I love in the description below. Thank you once again, folks, for coming by and listening to an old knuckle dragon tanker pilot with a lot of experience, still gaining a lot of knowledge. I appreciate all my subscribers, listeners, and followers on my social media, my YouTube channel, that you continue to support this show and you continue to support it financially too, which I really appreciate. Please subscribe. Become an All Ranks Club member. Those of you that join at the designated driver and by the bar will have special one-on-one time with me, Zoom meetings where we meet and talk about aviation things, question and answer periods. We also do 7-inch stickers of the KC-135 you see above me so that you can put them on things like your computer or your water bottle or any flat surface. We have 10 right now that we've printed up. We're working on the next 15. And those of you that become members of the All Ranks Club at the designated driver and by the bar will get one of these every month. Thanks again, folks. If you want to just support the show and donate to it, I've put my Venmo and my PayPal link below. Please send a donation. Up to you how much you want to send. Just know that I appreciate it and that everything that is sent goes to supporting the show. Thank you. I appreciate all of you so much for making this show go. Thank you to all my guests that have been on and who have spent time with me, leaving their legacy and their stories, but more importantly, there's lessons learned so that you know how the aviation world works increase your critical thinking skills both in the air, on the ground. But more importantly, your stories fuel our mission. So thanks. Sluggo, signing out here.